So, welcome back, listeners. It's been a while. Darren and I have just been reminiscing, and blimey, this is episode 7. So the first 6 that we did in the last couple of months of 2023 were rather hurriedly put together, and then we did the final one at Christmas, and which was lovely. We enjoyed doing that one. But then we've just both been mentally busy, and just haven't got around to it. We've just been too busy to actually get this down. So we've had this plan for some time. So apologies, first of all, for being away. It's now middle of March 2024, so we have been a little bit tardy, so apologies for that. But let's just remind ourselves why we're doing these. What is it that this is called the 50-something podcast? And we are looking at the world through the lens of a 50-something. So just expand on what I was saying there. So why are we doing this? From your point of view, why would we put together these podcasts, the 50-something podcasts?
I think 6 episodes in, we are learning that our audience is responding to certain things better than others. And I think it's important that whilst we've discussed a lot of different things, talked to lots of interesting people, I think we have to remain solidly committed to talking about the issues of being in your 50s, good and bad. So this year, I think we've discussed it, Andy, and I think we're going to be really focused around the challenges and talking to brands and talking to businesses and talking to people that are in their 50s, facing the challenges and coming up with solutions.
Exactly. We want to hear from you. If you want to be part of this podcast, please get in touch at 50somethingpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll have a chat. Let's get you on here. We're looking for people, for brands, for businesses who are actually embracing the nuances of living through your 50s.
So, Andy, we had the opportunity to meet someone who is embracing the challenge of being in their 50s whilst running a global fashion brand. The chap is called Bill Leach, and he is the global sales director at a wonderful British brand called John Smedley that has been manufacturing in the Derbyshire Hills for over 240 years and has an audience which is slightly older, shall we say. But as we found out, is doing lots and lots of innovative work to attract a younger consumer whilst maintaining the loyalty of that older consumer. So let's cut to us in the boardroom.
Today, Darren and I have got in the car. We've headed through the beautiful Cheshire and then probably Derbyshire countryside. And we're now in a little town called Matlock in northwest of England. It's been a bit of a drizzly day, as we explained on the journey over, but there's kind of a reason why we're here and why the drizzle works. We are very pleased to announce that we are with the very charismatic Bill Leach, who is Global Sales Director at John Smedley, the world-renowned knitwear, apparel, how do you describe it, Bill?
Knitwear manufacturers will do for me.
Knitwear manufacturers. So yeah, Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, well, hi, we are sat in the boardroom, are we, Bill?
We are indeed.
In a which we'll let Bill describe in a second. We're delighted to be here. We're going to talk about the business, about the heritage, about the artisans that still work here. We're going to talk about style. We're going to talk consumers, and hopefully everybody will leave with feeling like they wish they were sat in the office with us here today.
Yeah, but I mean, the room that we are in is the old boardroom, and I have to say, and Bill did say this when we walked in, we're really surrounded by eyes.
There's a lot of eyes on us here.
There's a lot of eyes on us. I'm looking at a portrait of the Queen, Prince Philip, and then various generations of the John Smedley family, and I think the guy over your shoulder there he's the second.
He's John Smedley the second. Yeah, he's the guy who effectively created the business and then handed it over to third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth generations where we are today.
So, talking about where we are today, because you told us something earlier. So the business has been going 240 years.
This year is our 240th anniversary.
And where's it been based for 240 years?
Right here. So you gentlemen are sitting in the boardroom of the oldest factory anywhere in the world that is still making what it originally made.
I think that's awesome.
It's wonderful, and it's British. That's great.
Correct. Entirely British. Entirely British.
With so many, British manufacturing and skills having to move overseas, for that still to be here is amazing.
Yeah. Correct. Absolutely. It's an amazing place, and as you've seen when you parked in the car park down the road, you've walked past hundreds of yards of building to get here, and if you picture back in time, way back in the middle of the 18th, 19th century, there could be up to 1,500 people working here at that point in time. Because our history wasn't actually all about manufacturing knitwear. It started somewhere else entirely.
Oh, and where was that?
So the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, around about 1770, 1780, just around the corner, you drove past it to get here, was a building called Cromford Mills.
Was that the Arkwright mill?
You have nailed it. That's Richard Arkwright's the very mill. And prior to that point in time, manufacturing for brands before the dawn of the Industrial Revolution was being done in people's homes. People would have knitting looms and sewing looms and things in their houses. And so harnessing the ability to use water wheels, etc., created the ability to build huge mills such as you've just seen. And shortly after that mill was created, around about 1780, his first engineer, a guy called John Smedley, was approached by a chap called Peter Nightingale, and Peter and John together, they built this factory. You may know the name Nightingale because his daughter was quite famous. She was a lady called Florence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, and she was a medic within this business for a period of time through the war period. And we've been here ever since 1784, so 240 years pretty much right here where we're sitting today. And we started life manufacturing sacks. Sacks would be used for the shipping of goods all over the canal network, all over the UK. Right. And then speeding up the whole timeline somewhat, sacks, we evolved from that into making underwear. Underwear was huge in the period when houses didn't have heating. If you're familiar with the phrase long johns, well, they come from John Smedley.
Really? I've got mine on.
It's not that cold, surely. And so ultimately the business evolved by becoming a prolific knitwear manufacturer to homes and armed forces around the world, not just in the UK. And then domestically, people started installing heating systems into their homes. So that presented a challenge to a business that specialises in making knitwear, because all of a sudden demand is going to go off the face of the cliff, right? Yeah. And it did. So very quickly, the people that around, many of the faces around this wall, particularly John Martin Smedley behind you, decided that we could quite quickly evolve our machinery from making very luxurious underwear into making very luxurious knitwear. And it was a very small tweak to our machines that allowed us to evolve over time from sacks for transportation to underwear to keep warm to then an extension of that into knitwear, which people are now wearing in 98 countries around the world.
You describe yourselves as the world's finest knitwear, made by the world's finest craftspeople.
Yep.
Now, they're fairly lofty statements. I mean, clearly you believe this, but how, just explain to our listeners who maybe aren't so familiar with John Smedley, why you believe this.
Great question, Andy. So there is lots of knitwear that's manufactured in the UK. Admittedly less than there was 50 years ago because there's less of us doing it. But those of us who've been lucky enough to survive, to continue doing what we do today, really had a choice to make all those years ago. You carried on making chunky, so you may familiarise that with the Darran sweater, etc., etc. Probably that's a 5 or 7 gauge knit, chunky, really about keeping you warm. In the cases of many of our competitors in Scotland, they may also have specialised in cashmere, and there'll be a number of brands like Johnson's of Elgin or Beg, who you may also have known across the years. We deliberately chose to work with a particular body of stations, as they're called in New Zealand, whereby we got to meet the families, got to meet the farmers, got to know their process. And for decades and decades, we have worked with them to bring their beautiful New Zealand merino wool or Sea Island cotton into the UK, and then it's that we turn into our product.
So all of your wool comes from New Zealand?
All of our merino wool comes from New Zealand, from the same stations that we have used for decades. And we know everything about the animals, the nutrition, the land they graze, the pasture. We know everything about it. So it gives us a great deal of confidence that we are taking, as my CEO refers to, a noble yarn and turning that into a very fine product. There's an interesting story behind the word fine, because finest is it can have two meanings. In our case, we specialise in very fine gauge knitwear. So that's a play on words in that we specialise in what we call 30 gauge. So for anybody browsing our website, if you see 30G, that's a 30 gauge, that's really, really fine gauge knitwear. It's beautifully fine and feels so luxurious. Many, many years ago, and I can't mention too many names, there was a very famous advert starring a model called Nick Kamen. And Nick Kamen walked into a laundrette. We're all old enough to remember that.
The Levi's, yeah.
You got it. Well, the gentleman who created that particular campaign was having a lunch with our CEO many years ago. You've named that man. And he said to Ian, perhaps you should think about using the phrase the world's finest knitwear. And it stuck. And it resonates around the world. And sometimes with a brand who's working internationally, the hard part can be finding a catchphrase or a slogan that resonates everywhere. And it's worked perfectly for us. So we very much believe we make the world's finest knitwear, and we very much rely on the world's finest craftsmen and women to make that knitwear for us.
Just building on that, so we were talking earlier, and Bill was telling us about the people who work on the shop floor, and there are generations of people, like 4 generations have sat in the same chair.
Absolutely.
Something like that. I mean, just build on that a little bit, because this kind of idea of the world's finest craftspeople, and you are keeping crafts alive, really, which I think in this day and age, we're all modern people, we're all digital people, but at the same time, that idea of that quality coming out through real traditional craft is, if you can continue that within your brand and your business right now, that's something to be sought out.
Yeah, we've built our entire business over the generations and centuries on being a handmade product. So as you'll see when we walk around the factory later on today, we've got latest state-of-the-art technology, manufacturing the most beautifully manufactured front, back, sleeve, cuff, collar. But all of those things have to come together. And they come together through a human being. And in our case, we've had our colleagues up to 5th generation, in actual fact, sitting in the same seat with exactly the same hand skills and the ability that they've learnt from their mother or their father, etc., that has taught them the linking process or the seaming process that allows our products to be built the way they are.
I mean, that's amazing. I think, as well, the thing that really amazes me when you tell that sort of story is it feels like that when you see a John Smedley sweater, it's going to be something really old-fashioned looking, and it's not. I mean, to be honest, and I tell you what, it wears and washes really well. I've got a John Smedley sweater that I've had for about 25 years, and I looked at my wardrobe yesterday. It's still
Here.
Fantastic.
More power to you. Thank you very
But it
much.
feels very much. Go on the website, listeners. The website address is,
www.johnsmedley.com.
and you will see it's not. This is not an old-fashioned brand. It's dealing with traditional techniques, but with modern technology.
Correct.
And I know you've got some great technology stories. And also, sorry, Darren, I'm doing all the talking. Jump in, mate, you know.
Yeah, you have to take a breath on me.
And another thing, but you were telling us earlier about, because how do you recruit for people? We're Matlock, listeners at home, is a beautiful but very quiet northern little village with there's the mill pond at the top that will no doubt feed the machines down the bottom. It's very rainy, which I'm guessing is really good for wool. And but it's like, where do you get the people who are actually going to do these skills? How do you recruit for new designers? And you were telling us about leads. So just tell us that story.
Yes, so I'll dilute that a little further in that we're actually in a tiny place called Lee Bridge, and that's Lea Bridge. And Lee Bridge is associated with a little hamlet called Lee, and Lee is on the outskirts of Cromford, and Cromford is on the outskirts of Matlock. Matlock is quite well known if you're from the north of England, in that if you were a biker or you like to take a nice car out on a Sunday, you might take a trip to Matlock Bath and then go and have fish and chips and whatever else. So we really are, more than a stone's throw away from Matlock. We're surrounded by a couple of really small hamlets and villages, and they have been the lifeblood of our craftsmen and women for the 240 years that we've been here. We're not on a major arterial route when it comes to public transport, so we've been very fortunate that being a well-known good employer over the last 240 years, the families who live locally, all when they come to working age, realise that a career at John Smedley might be something for them. And when you walk around the shop floor, you will see so many people who are from within a walk or a short drive away from this factory. Recruiting is always a challenge wherever you are, and I think, reading the media nowadays, we're talking about unemployment being at pretty much an all-time low in the UK. But part of the problem that we have where we are is that because we're not central, because if we were in London, we wouldn't have any challenges recruitment-wise. The challenge we have here is that we very much depend on a local resource to come and make our garments for us. And then when it comes to design, when it comes to the creative end of our spectrum, we've been very lucky to find, recruit, develop, work with, and then really ingrain into our senior team people who truly just live and breathe everything we make from one day to the next.
There's design developments here as well.
Every single thing. So the design process starts here, the manufacturing process ends here and starts here. So every single thing, effectively from concept to carrier bag, is right here from the building that you're sitting in today.
Can you just take us through that process, just very briefly? You don't need to go into any detail, but I think it might be just quite interesting to understand that all of that takes place here.
Yeah.
International brand.
Yeah, so I think many of us in this industry will know that manufacturing in the UK really hasn't been particularly cool for the last 40 years or so. So when it comes to Government and Department for Business and Trade, as they are now known, they're very interested in fintech, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Don't really give much support to what we call manufacturing. And that's been the case for the last 4 decades or so. And we've seen this huge decline in manufacturing in the UK. So those of us, those artisans who are still doing what we do, are immensely proud of how we do what we do. And effectively, we do one thing. We knit very fine garments, and that's it. We don't profess to be anything else. We just make beautiful knitwear. So the recruitment process is always going to remain a challenge for us here. And also, I think the concept of remote working that really was born out of the COVID era, we experienced that, we dallied with that. It didn't really work because until you've touched and felt our product across the 4 or 5 different yarns that we utilize or blend together, you genuinely don't get it until you've done that. And then when you've done that, you want to keep doing that.
So, yeah, that was all a little bit echoey. The acoustics were pretty poor. It was a really big open space with like a 15, 20-foot ceiling. And like it said in the clip there, we were surrounded by portraits of the old John Smedley family and various board members and the Queen, etc., etc. But that is the oldest factory in the world that has consistently been manufacturing the same or similar product in the same building, which is amazing. I mean, absolutely incredible. That, for me, was one of the highlights. And also finding out that Florence Nightingale was actually related to this family somewhere down the line. So, yeah, amazing history, beautiful building. Bill took us on a tour of the factory. We saw all the various stages of manufacture. So what were your favourite parts of this trip? What were the highlights?
God, Andy, loads. I think the setting was so lovely in the Derbyshire Hills. The different manufacturing processes, so the old machinery, the new machinery, and that the business has embraced technology to ensure it can stay relevant and quick to market. Meeting the staff that have worked there for generations. I think he said, was it fourth, fifth generation?
Yeah, could just say on that as well. Yeah, but the local workforce as well. I mean, how amazing! You're in the Pennines. In the Peak District, and yet you've still got this kind of semi-artisanal workforce, really highly skilled, as well as having all this cutting-edge machinery. Yeah. I mean, it's really mind-blowing, really, that they could do that in this small town of Matlock.
Yeah, and they've kept it there for more than 2 centuries, which is, amazing.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So yeah, I love that blend of the history and the innovation. I think that's an amazing place to be. What were your highlights?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of that. I think, walking through the factory, I mean, it's a massive sprawling site. And there are, old parts that are not really used anymore, as well as parts that have been reworked since COVID as well. He took us on a full journey through, the kind of the design studio, the manufacturer with all the actual knitting machinery, which creates this amazingly, I mean, they do talk about it being the finest, finest technology, finest quality.
Finest knitwear in the world.
Finest knitwear in the world, which, I challenged when we were with him, so it's quite a statement. But they really believe this, and, they bring in the wool from New Zealand, merino wool. They've been using the same farm,
stations,
sheep stations.
That's right.
Yeah. They've been using the same stations for like centuries. And the quality is absolutely amazing. And just seeing the whole process, I thought was fascinating.
So wonderful to go around the factory, see all the technology, the staff, the yarns, how it's packed. But one question we both had, Andy, was how would they style us to in our 50s, and how would they make us feel confident and stylish and challenge that issue around feeling invisible when you're older? So let's hear from Bill about how he would style 2 men in their 50s. Have you got some ideas about how you'd start me and Andy? And obviously we're going to share these images with the listeners.
Well, I will do. And the reality of our situation is here comes my insult, first of all. So the insult is this, and it's not really an insult. You're very good friends and you've been mates for years and years and years. So whether you like it or not, at your core, your dress sense is probably quite similar in certain areas. There'll be signature things. There'll be signature things that particularly Andy will, through his communist military thing going on.
I'm sat with Che Guevara. Comrades, exactly.
But probably when it comes down to the tee, when it comes down to the basic tee and the trouser and the pant, the jean or whatever else you're wearing, they're probably broadly similar. So I've got in front of me a couple of visuals of typically what our 50-somethings are wearing now, which is a fine gauge roll neck because it is so versatile. And Darren, you're looking at what I referred to as a cardigan. Now that cardigan is called Cullen.
Right.
It's made from part cashmere and part wool, merino wool. It's one of our best-selling garments in all of our stores and also our wholesale partners around the world. It's beautiful to touch. It's the cashmere adds a really luxurious feel to it. And as you can see, the guy in question is styling that cardigan over a crew neck t-shirt, and he couldn't look more relaxed or comfortable.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, interestingly, the models, it's the same guy, is it?
Yes, exactly the same guy.
So how old's the model?
I think he's 56, actually. Right. I think so.
Did you target, I mean, again, this is just really interesting from a 50-something perspective. You're actually now, because it's only been in the last, 10 years? That you will have seen older models
used,
because everything has always been targeting to the young.
Yep.
You know,
obsession with youth for most brands.
We talked about Japan earlier.
That's right.
We'll come back to that.
That's right.
But we're seeing more and more now that we feel more represented in
100%.
Fashion media,
100%.
in campaigns.
I think brands have realised that in this very inclusive society in which we live now, it's no longer about constantly promoting the skinny 20-something as being the perfect vision of how to look. And if I think about my stores and I think about our consumers, we've always believed that you should walk into a store, be able to look at an image and use that to be influential. That's why we put imagery in stores. If I've got an androgynous 20-something on a visual in my John Smedley store at Jermyn Street in St James's, we don't believe that is giving the right feels to the consumer who's typically walking into the store, because it's not who they are. So by using the model we have here, who looks like us, looks like us. Oh, actually, I wish I did look like him, but there we go.
So it's a little bit skinny.
Has he been photoshopped?
But he looks to be in his 50s.
Yeah, he does.
And he rocks it really well, and he's styled really well, and it's very natural on him. You'll see he's wearing a roll neck in a way that I haven't yet been brave enough to wear, which is completely unrolled, so it's just extended and then just pulled down.
I think my neck's long.
Yeah.
I think my neck's wider than it's too long.
But in terms of, you've got a couple of styles there. So Andy, you're staring at the model in the 30 gauge Richards roll neck, which is one of our best sellers. It's on what we call Easy Fit. And Easy Fit for us is a little bit more accommodating than what we refer to as our standard fit. So it comes from our heritage collection, and there's an interesting story here. Throughout our careers, we've seen people like Abercrombie and Fitch, for example, who just wouldn't have an XL in their store. No. They were didn't want that consumer. We started life making our beautiful knitwear on what we call today as the heritage fit. We've evolved over the last 20 years into making it into a standard fit. We also had a slim fit. Guess where we're going now? We're actually going right back to heritage fit. So all of our new styles, every single season, in every single colour, all of the newness is coming through on our heritage fit, because most people are wanting things to be a bit more comfortable. And you've got the fact that physically around the world. People are getting taller, people are getting bigger in most senses. Feet size is growing every generation, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So those two styles you're looking at: a typical cashmere blend cardigan, a 30 gauge merino wool roll neck. And then I'm going to throw another example. So I've already shown you the Cullen cardigan, and this is the Petworth cardigan, which is 30 gauge, very, very fine. So same thing, looks great over a crew.
Yeah.
I quite often would recommend to you guys, if you're wearing this style, wear that over the roll neck.
Really?
So you can play with colour contrast, etc., etc.
Two pieces of knitwear together, it sounds... I'm going to be really warm. Is that not the case?
Not at all. As I said, merino wool is one of the most breathable things you can possibly imagine, and until you've tried that, you'll never really know it. It's no surprise that the sports brands, the Adidas's, the Nikes, the Under Armours, and have followed some of the smaller specialist brands like Rafa, the cycling brand.
Yeah.
We did a collaboration with Rafa on a 100% merino wool cycling jersey years ago, because they saw the benefits of it. They understood the qualities of wearing a merino piece for a functional piece of sportswear.
Yeah, and I think the other thing people would perhaps say to us, I like John Smedley, but I'm only going to wear it in winter. But clearly,
not at all.
You can wear it all year round.
Very much so, and that's a sign of how things have changed over generations. In that, typically, we've grown up in a country whereby you typically wear wool through a winter season. But as wool has become fine, the fine gauge that we manufacture, people are wearing it all year round.
Okay.
So my next piece to show you is, for those of you who might be a little bit shorter in the neck, is Harcourt, which we would describe as a mock turtle neck.
Okay.
So you can't roll this over. It's not a roll neck. It's a mock turtle, and this works really well. It's a very refined piece, actually, because if you haven't quite got the confidence or perhaps the neck to wear a full roll neck, a mock turtle can give you the same lines, same styling. So the next time I'm going to show you, you might recognise the silhouette. This is called Peaks, and Peaks is a 30 gauge. It's a blended fabric, part wool, part sea island cotton, so you get the absolute benefits of both garments.
Can you explain sea island cotton to us, Bill?
Yes, I can. So sea island cotton is regarded as the finest quality cotton anywhere in the world. The origins of it go back to the Caribbean, in where it was first grown, and now on a much larger scale, it's typically, in our case, we buy it all from California, and we buy it from California because they've really embraced, I don't want to say water neutrality, but they've embraced the concept of using a lot less water in the manufacture of cotton. Yeah. And that to us is hugely important, because whilst everyone's chatting about sustainability in the industry and blah blah blah, there's so much greenwashing that's happening, although becoming increasingly hard to identify. I think our belief has always been, don't just do things right, but do the right things. And for us, that means source better quality, source your cotton from a better location, visit those areas and see how regenerative farming is being used in the production of cotton. That allows me as a sales guy to be super confident when I'm talking to our partners around the world that we can be confident about our cotton. So this garment, Peaks, it's got a long collar. So if you picture, go back 20, 30 years and picture Paul Weller, picture Roger Daltrey. Yeah. They're wearing this particular style. It is to this day one of our best-selling styles, and we have it in a number of guises. We offer it in sea island cotton. We also offer it in this blend, which is a blend of 54% merino and 46% sea island cotton. It gives you the best of both worlds, and by that, as I referred to earlier, it hangs beautifully on the body, even 4, 5, 6 hours after you started wearing it. And it looks brilliant under soft tailoring, because the points of these collars just sit off your collarbone, and it adds a really, really sleek line to how you wear it. And this is one of my personal favourites. In fact, when I first started buying Smedley as a consumer from Hoopers of Wilmslow, around about 30 years ago, this was the style in cotton that I very, very first bought into, and it's the style that I have most of in my wardrobe.
Right, okay.
I adore it. But then going back to your earlier question about how do you style different people, so If you perhaps don't buy into that, I'm going to call that the mod look.
Okay.
So that's very much the mod look.
Mr. Weller, thank you.
Correct. You've got exactly the same style, but with a zip closure as opposed to a 3-button placket. And this just adds a certain something to it. You'll probably have seen both of these on a very famous Saturday night football review show, because a number of people on that particular show who cannot, because of the channel they're on, wear a branded garment, will more often than not choose to wear something from this particular locale.
You definitely have that match of the day the audience where they can't wear something branded, but they want to look somewhere between tailored and casual.
Absolutely right. Yeah, very, very much so. Because the days of the shirt. I mean, Gary still likes to rock a very tight-fitting shirt. I wish I could still do that, but it works. It works so well overall. And then for something, probably this is a bit. I've been thinking more Andy than Darren here. This is a wide-fitting polo shirt that's fully.
When he said wide-fitting,
oversized. Oversized. I mean oversized. So oversized, full button all the way through. So again, you can rock. You can rock it over. All right. You can rock that over a crew neck t-shirt. Some would even choose to rock that over a long sleeve garment, depending on who you are. But it's a younger audience.
I'd actually wear that in the summer in a crew neck t-shirt and open.
Absolutely.
And just,
absolutely right.
That'd be very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
1950s sort of feel to it.
Yeah. I'm back to 50s style.
Yeah. And we have variants of that with contrast colour piping on the placket running all the way down to really enhance that 50s vibe.
Yeah, nice. Very nice.
But as you can see from the colour palette at the bottom of the page that we're looking at there, most of the styles we offer each season, and we have 2 seasons per year, are offered in up to 25 colours per garment. So there's lots of room for that individuality that you might be seeking.
Yes.
Although most of us here in the UK wear black, navy, charcoal.
Yes.
But you have a colour palette which people can test different styles and be a bit bolder, even on holiday or somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Different times of year, different climates.
Correct. And we sell most of our colour actually throughout Europe and in Japan.
Right, okay.
Because as you can imagine, the Europeans, particularly European men, like colour a lot more than we typically do in the UK.
Yes, yeah.
We were chatting earlier, and I was saying that in my mind, John Smedley was a very calm, quiet, relaxed, sort of breath of fresh air brand, which I think when you look at the logo, look at the website, for me it's very clean, it's very clear, and you said, and that's a problem with Japan. Just expand on that. I mean,
yes, it's in Japan. It's perfect actually. It's more the likes of China where it becomes a bit of a headache for me as the person who's responsible for our sales growth. Japan love what we do. In actual fact, we're celebrating 110 years of operating in Japan this year as well. So it's crazy. So it's our 240th and it's our 110th anniversary of trading in Japan. Which, if you think back to the logistics of how the hell you get product to and from buyers 110 years ago. Well, that's a different conversation. So there I was in Shanghai 2019 November. I think I brought COVID back from China as it happens then, but that's a different subject.
Thanks for that.
I was exhibiting an interesting show in the middle of Shanghai called The Best of British. So I'm alongside the likes of McLaren and Bentley and lots of other people. And we've been invited by the British government to put ourselves in front of Chinese consumers. So I packed my case and I travelled across to Shanghai and I set up our stand and some beautiful graphics, and I had a wall full of graphics of the Beatles and Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn and the royal family in some cases and Marilyn Monroe, and I wondered why halfway through the day I wasn't getting an awful lot of interest from the crowds of young Chinese consumers who were walking past and not even giving me a blink. Until I stepped in front of a group who looked quite smiley and friendly and asked them if they recognised any of the people, and it was broadly speaking a no, just didn't have any connection with those images that we as a heritage brand had been talking so proudly of for many, many years. And it was at that point when I then showed them a photograph of Eva Longoria and then another photograph of Henry Cavill, for example. It was at that point that I realised that we have to talk differently to different ages of consumers in different cultures. And we can't keep banging on about our brilliant heritage, of which I'm so proud. But you know what? Pointless me doing that to a 22-year-old Chinese student who might be from a wealthy family or otherwise, but they don't really want to associate with things from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, it's interesting. So back to the 50-something podcast. You're in your 50s, we're in our 50s. You're talking about a brand that's 240 years old. It has to keep evolving and changing. How do you think people of our age group should take that into consideration to where they are in their lives? Should they take 50s as a moment to stand still, not move forward, be less confident? How do you feel about it?
I've used the phrase liberation before, and I think for those of us in our 50s who have our health, and that I think is the first thing to worry about. As long as you've got your health, pretty much everything else falls into place, and by that does your identity. And I think you should dress within your means as best you can, and if that means buying second-hand through Vinted, then fine. If that means walking into a John Smedley store, then fine. If that means going into luxury department stores, great. But I think ultimately the success of this business will continue as long as we keep doing what we've always done, which is focus on the garments, focus on the quality of the garments, and focus on our people here. And I can tell you a funny story about I joined this business 1st of June 2016. About 22 or 23 days later, the British public made a vote. And that vote was the Brexit vote. Now, let's not get into politics. But I walked into my MD's office and said, so I joined this business 3 weeks ago, and all of a sudden we've now got a great big hurdle coming up. And Ian said to me, look around the wall. Can you imagine what these people had to go through over the previous 240 years? He said, Brexit will be what Brexit will be, and as long as we keep doing what we're doing, we'll be fine. And I'm very thankful to say that's very true. I wasn't to know that around the corner was a COVID pandemic and then a war between Russia and Ukraine, and I think my view on the question, Andy, Darren, is that you've just got to roll with the punches. You get to our age, you find out where you're comfortable, you find out what in your wardrobe makes you comfortable. So, for example, the skinny jeans in my wardrobe have been untouched for quite a few years now, and they may as well go. And they may as well go onto the Vinted site. So if somebody else wants to enjoy them, then that's probably what I should do when I get around to it. But
I like hanging on to mine. one day.
So I just think we've probably all got wardrobes that are a bit too full of a lot of stuff that we don't actually need, and I think we should all be thinking about probably cleaning down a little bit in terms of what might be in our wardrobe, declutter a little bit, and that will help us with.
Have you been talking to my wife?
So, I believe Bill sent you some samples, Andy, and I can see on screen you're looking sharp and stylish. Can you tell me about what you're wearing and how it's making you feel?
Yeah. So when we were with Bill, as you've just heard in the clip, but prior to this, we'd sent him what we call our personas. So he got a photograph of us, things that we like, what sizes we are, and all that kind of stuff. So he got a really good idea, and so he styled us based on those personas that we sent him. Now, I'm actually wearing a T-shirt that Bill sent. I'll post it online so you can see what it is. But this is a Hillcote, Hillcote T-shirt. Now, it's 54% merino wool and 46% cotton. And I love it. It's brilliant. I've worn it pretty much every day this week. And it's a very, very soft knit. very tight knit, but it's quite loose, loose fitting. I'm wearing a size large, and I love it. It's navy, very relaxed fit, very comfortable. I feel very sort of, quite confident. I could wear this to, I could wear it to a meeting with a loose jacket over the top, or I can just wear it for slouching around in at the same time. So what you've got the same. Have you got the same as me, or have you got something different?
I've got the same as you in a medium.
In a medium? Liar.
No, mine's an extra large, and I did a 2,000 press ups before we came on, so the boobs are okay at the moment. No, I love it, Andy. I've got the same as you. I think it's kind of a really posh t-shirt that's versatile, but you feel really luxurious in it. And it was really interesting that when we were with Bill, we found out the properties of merino wool. It naturally keeps you cool and naturally keeps you warm, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Something as well that just on the merino wool, because I did question, right, you're in the Peak District, you're surrounded by sheep. Why do you go all the way to New Zealand to get your wool? And he pointed out this is the finest wool in the world, and that if you'd brought New Zealand sheep into the Peak District within a couple of years, the wool would have changed quality, and it had become more sort of textured, yarny, kind of Aran kind of quality, more rugged. So that to keep having this very, very fine wool, they have to keep bringing it in from New Zealand. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. So what else did you get?
Yeah, I also received a Noah polo shirt, also in merino, and I'm travelling to Vietnam and Thailand for my fiance's 50th shortly. So I thought a polo shirt would be perfect. And interestingly, whilst most people might associate wool with warmth, merino wool keeps you cool and warm. So it will be perfect for those glorious summer evenings in the Far East, which I'm really looking forward to. And aside from your hill coat, Andy, what else did you receive?
Well, I'm actually going to do an unboxing right now.
Oh, lovely. So
I've got here, this is in its plastic wrap. This is a Dorset shirt, 100% John Smedley's merino extra fine in midnight, which is kind of like a very dark navy. And this is size large, which I'm sure will be far too big. No, it won't. It'll be perfect. So it's in this nicely wrapped with a tissue inside. That's the sound of tissue. And on the tissue, it says, John Smedley, world's finest knitwear, by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II and His Royal Highness Prince of Wales. So we do have these two royal warrants, which obviously superseded now by it'll be the King and possibly Prince Wales again. Anyway, I've opened up my sweater, and I have to say it is absolutely beautiful. Really, really fine knit. Beautiful, nice little collar on it. I'm sure if you go to the John Smedley website, you'll be able to see this, but we will post it. But this is the Dorset shirt, and it's kind of a long-sleeved polo, I guess. Really, really, really lovely. So thank you for that. Yeah, listeners, pop over, have a look. Pop over to the John Smedley website. And check out the produce. It's really great. Products.
The product is modern. The fabric is beautiful, and it's adaptable. As me and Andy have found out, this merino wool is actually amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and it lasts as well. So, while we were with Bill, we were talking about the brand, obviously, and the quality of it. And I found a photograph of myself from 10 years ago, and I was quite a lot slimmer, it seems. But I was wearing a John Smedley sweater. That I've had, and it's still in my wardrobe now, and I've had it for at least 25 years, and the quality is insanely good still. So you've been listening to episode 7 of the 50-something podcast with Darran and me, Andy, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been really nice chatting. Thanks so much again to Bill. If you want to email us, get in touch, please do email us at 50somethingpodcast@gmail.com. This podcast is available on all of your favourite podcast channels, including Spotify, Apple Play, Google Play, etc., etc.
The 50-something podcast.
Because things happen in your 50s.